Welcome, everyone. My guest this week is Dr. Marillea Yu, and she is also known as the non-toxic doc. Today, we are talking all about toxins in our food when it comes to cooking, when it comes to storage of food, and even just eating food. So welcome, Marillea. Thank you for being here and talking to us all about non-toxic safety.
Hi, Dr. Daina. Thanks for having me here today. I'm really happy to be here because I love talking about environmental toxins. So this is great for me.
Awesome. Let's get started let's just jump right in. I want to ask you a little bit about, I guess, pesticides in our food since they are so prevalent. And more specifically, I know that our buying organic is a lot better, but let's talk a little bit about the conventional produce first and maybe how we can reduce some of the pesticides, if that's even possible, or should we just buy organic?
Yeah, so with our food supply, I urge everyone to buy organic as much as possible, but sometimes that's just not feasible due to availability or, socioeconomic reasons, right? So I love to use the environmental working group Dirty Dozen Clean 15. So the Dirty Dozen are the produce with the highest amounts of pesticides, and you should, as much as possible, buy those organic. And the Clean 15 are the ones that are that have the least amount of pesticides. So you can buy them conventionally, so non-organically grown. And so what that does is help to reduce your toxic burden of the pesticides that you are taking in through food. The other thing about organic foods is they're not going to be, there's a low chance that they're going to be completely pesticide free just because of how ubiquitous pesticides are and other chemicals are in our environment. So it's not like we can build a bubble around, areas that we grow food in to ensure that they're totally organic and pesticide free and, herbicides and all that other stuff. But what it does when you buy organic is it reduces the amount of chemicals that your body has to process. So that is beneficial to your health, right? The less you have to manage, the more resources can go towards maintaining and improving your health. So, so that list is put out every year. So they do a review every year. And other alternatives, if you cannot buy organic, is you can peel fruit and vegetables to try to reduce the amount of pesticides on the surface. Some studies have shown that, being able to peel the produce removes almost all of the pesticides. And also using a acidic type of wash seems to help to reduce the amount of pesticides found on the fruit and vegetables. So acidic, and then they tried some alkaline ones as well, but they found that the acidic ones were the most effective in reducing pesticide residues. So those are some things that you can do.
Amazing. So, let's talk a little bit more about that, the acidic washes. Can we use things like lemon juice or vinegar, things that we have at home, or do we need to buy a specific product?
There are some commercial products available. I haven't tested out too many. So the studies that were used, they used a certain type of radish that they had cut up and soaked to get like the acidity out of it. I think they also use boric acid and citric acid as well. So it may be effective to just use something natural like vinegar. But I haven't looked at those studies to see like what types of vinegar might be the most effective. It didn't really tell me like the degree of acidity that was required to make sure that most of the pesticides were taken off the surface.
Okay. Interesting to know that. I usually wash my berries in vinegar just to be safe because I don't really know. But yeah, I guess it's good to know that there are some studies out there that show that acidity is helpful.
Yeah, and I find that also when you rinse off the berries, it keeps them for longer, right? It
Yeah.
washes, because there might be other things on the surfaces of the fruit that may contribute to spoilage. I find that my berries don't mold as quickly when I do that, so that's also beneficial.
Yeah. Less what food waste is always a good thing.
Mm.
All right, let's talk a little bit about maybe why we should care about reducing our toxic burden and maybe talk a little bit about, I guess, detoxing our bodies naturally, or if you have anything that you want to say about that.
Yeah, so I focus on environmental medicine, which looks at the effect of environmental toxins on our body. So it's not just any toxin. There are many things in the environment that would be poisonous, but you may not necessarily be exposed to it in your day-to-day life. It might not have the potential to build up in your body, and it so you may not even be around it, but it's there. So what I'm focusing on is the are the compounds that you are actually exposed to day to day, and their effects on neurological development. So things like your brain and the nerves and um, the endocrine system, so your hormones and just other things like that, and like your reproductive system. So we're looking at real life exposures that translate to real life effects on your body and as well as on the ecosystem. So we're not just talking about like toxins like in general, we're looking at specific things. So the importance of avoiding that now is it's actually really important because in our current environment, with the industrialization that we've gone through, we are experiencing, a lot of really great movements forward in technology. But what that has also opened up is, the whole, like the whole, I guess, industry of like manufacturing and things like that, like all these plants that are spewing out all sorts of byproducts and waste that are created when we make things. So that is in our environment. So usually our body would be able to adapt to those insults if we were to if we were to evolve alongside that sort of a development, but slowly, right? Whereas in reality, there's a lot of toxins coming at us from all directions all the time. And we haven't really studied the effects of everything together, right? So we don't actually know to what degree the synergistic effect of these toxins are. We just know that they're there. And we've studied quite a number of them, but usually by themselves. So I guess the importance of this is being aware of what we can actually avoid, because there are things that we can avoid, and reducing all the toxins that our body has to process. So our liver has to manage all that, right? And then if our liver isn't working as well as it should be for various reasons, then it goes to other less efficient organs in our body to take care of, which then leads to other issues with those organs, because that's not their primary function, and also a buildup in the body. So the less you are exposed to, the less likely things are able to build up, and in theory, the better health you should be able to enjoy.
Yeah, and all of these things also lead to more inflammation in the body, which can lead to so many diseases and conditions. Do you see this a lot as well?
Yeah, so there's a lot of environmental toxicity related to a lot of autoimmune conditions, just because of the inflammation that it involves, as well as the way that it interferes with other processes in the body and cell function. So uh, overloading inflammation in your body, not really knowing what to do with it, will cause all sorts of problems in the body that will lead to things like autoimmune disease, where the body is mistaking its own tissue as something to destroy and get rid of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is all super important, and I want to focus a lot on the food toxins, because there are toxins, like you mentioned, everywhere. It's in like the things that we put into our body, things that we put onto our body, even just the air around us, and even like through manufacturing of goods and things. Like it's something that's unavoidable. So we want to reduce it as much as possible. And today we're talking all about food. So the next thing I guess I want to talk about is, how should we be cooking our food? Because I think a lot of people, especially when it comes to meat, and I know it's barbecue season, so this is something that's happening a little bit more often than I guess our winter months, but we're also in Canada. I think people barbecue all year round. Can you talk to us a little bit about, I guess, how we should be cooking our foods and maybe reducing toxins in that way, or how maybe our cooking processes might lead to more toxins?
Yeah, so with the grilling of meat, so let me just start with saying that the safest ways of cooking meat are also the most boring ways of cooking meat. I mean, you know, like cooking in a crock pot it's actually great for some things, but in terms of a nice steak, that is really not ideal. So the safest ways to cook are like baking and roasting, um, cooking at like with moist heat at low temperatures, so like slow cooking, um, but really not ideal for when you're doing an outdoor barbecue if you want delicious meat. So some of the things to avoid it would be to like avoid overcooking the meat, and also the concern with grilling is things like polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, or PAHs, which are products of incomplete combustion. So that burning, like that charred material, that's all PAH. So what you would like to do is not cook on a grill that has a lot of that on it. So trying to maybe, I don't know if there are any grills that allow that to run off so that it's not either touching the meat again or having the smoke blow back up onto the meat. So like cooking on open flame would be more likely to create those products of incomplete combustion. But also, that's where a lot of the flavor is, unfortunately. So things that you can do to minimize the oxidation of the meat would be to use marinades such as beer, which I didn't realize. Certain types of beers, not all beers are created equal, but there's a study on that showed different types of beer help to reduce the formation of these compounds, as well as vinegar. So vinegar marinades, they found that spraying the steak with vinegar before they cooked it, I don't know what the benefits of that would be taste-wise, but it was something that was helpful. Right. And then using antioxidants in the marinades, like rosemary, like a lot of the herbs that we use to flavor our foods are actually really highly antioxidant. So they found that to be helpful as well. And then in your general diet, just making sure that you are getting enough antioxidants to manage, the PAHs. Because also PAHs are not found just in meat, like they're found anywhere anything is being burned. So exhaust, right? Like if you're around people who smoke, all that stuff coming off the end of the cigarette, those are all PAHs, right? And those do have negative effects on your health. So if you're going to enjoy the steak, maybe an antioxidant, serving of wine, or, maybe, some nice blueberries, or, organic berries with a lot of antioxidants. Eat your vegetables to help mitigate, those potentially negative effects on your body.
That's
And
so
don't eat steak
interesting.
all the time. No grilling steak every day.
Yeah, so reduce it as much as possible, I guess.
Yeah. Like, the other thing that I find for myself is knowing that these things are out there. Like, I like a grilled steak, but I know that having a grilled steak every day is not healthy, right? And then also the quality of my meat that I select. I will, when I'm at home, I will go for the the grass-fed, grass-finished, pastured steak, right? And then the rest of the time, I just make sure that I'm eating all, like, as much as possible with my health goals in mind, right? Like, what's the point in enjoying life, if, or like living a long life, I guess, and you can't enjoy these foods, which to me is part of why I enjoy life.
Yeah, that's so important. And I think
Mm.
also what you're probably saying is a variety of foods. So that way we're also helping our body to process all these toxins while we can still enjoy things that have these toxins.
Yeah, yeah, like it's living realistically.
Hmm. Awesome. Let's talk a little bit about coffee and tea, because I know a lot of people are obsessed with either one of these or maybe both. But I know that there are a lot of pesticides in the growth of a lot of these. So can we talk a little bit more about those? Maybe choosing better options, or if we can reduce our toxic burden, and whether we need to buy organic coffee and tea as well.
Yeah, so with coffee, it's because coffee is a commodity. Like, everyone wants coffee, everyone loves coffee, they're willing to pay for it. So these crops are heavily guarded, right? They're going to do everything they can to ensure that they get a good crop. So that means that in a lot of cases, if they're not grown organically, they're going to be using a lot of pesticides, right? But looking at the studies, it shows that the washing and the roasting process actually reduces the majority of the pesticides found on the coffee, which is good news for coffee drinkers. But for myself, I will still choose organically grown coffee, because while we're not being exposed to the pesticides on the coffee bean anymore, the people who are growing it are still spraying the pesticides, right? So I've kind of, in some cases, I try to shift my awareness to what would be the most beneficial for everyone involved, right? Like, I thought about that. I'm like, okay, that's great. I can buy whatever type of coffee I want. But then I thought about it, and it's like, they're still using pesticides throughout the growing process. So that is one of the main reasons that I would opt towards organic, to kind of support the movement in that direction, right? Because these pesticides are still going to be used, whether or not they make it to our coffee, like the coffee that we consume. And also, if you're choosing decaf, to use Swiss water decaf, right? Because conventionally, decaffeinated coffee uses solvents, which are supposed to be rinsed out afterwards, to remove the caffeine, but they may not be able to, remove all the solvents. So if you're someone who is sensitive, or someone who is wanting to avoid further exposure, and solvents can cause a lot of problems for people, you would want to choose Swiss water decaf.
I've never heard of that before. That's so interesting.
Oh, yeah. It's actually, if you look for it, you'll see what I mean. But otherwise, if it doesn't say Swiss water decaf, then it's probably conventionally decaffeinated. And it's a really interesting process, like how they use water to decaffeinate. So
That's
making it,
probably safer, I guess.
yeah, making it like they put less toxins through the process, so that would, reduce your exposure. And then you wanted to talk about tea, right? So with tea, The concern is not so much the pesticides, because they don't seem to have too much on them when they're tested. It's the way that the tea leaves take up certain nutrients and metals in the soil. So the issue with the tea is the heavy metals. When you're looking at tea, you're looking at like the white tea, the green tea, and then the black tea. So the green tea has been grown for like a medium amount of time compared to, and then harvested compared to the white and the black tea. So it's less likely to have taken up more heavy metals than the other teas. So the heavy metals that they're looking at are lead, cadmium, arsenic, stuff that is found in the ground, right? So there are some studies looking at the different types of teas and where they're grown, and they found that the white tea from India, organic teas from Japan and Sri Lanka have the least amount of heavy metal contaminants in them.
Oh,
So if you are looking for teas, look in that region. So white tea from India and organic green tea from Japan and Sri Lanka. Sorry?
What about black tea?
They were found to have higher levels of heavy metals. So you'd probably want to also look at Japan and Sri Lanka.
Good to know. I drink a lot of black tea.
For that. Yeah, it's unfortunate. Yeah, you can switch to green. You don't like green?
Yeah. Oh, I love green tea. I'm obsessed with all teas, but yeah, matcha is one of my go-tos. Is that something I should be worried about too?
Well, looking at where it's sourced, right? The antioxidant value of the tea seems to surpass the amount of heavy metals that they found in it, like in terms of cost benefit. But since we know this, it's a good time to switch over to teas found in these regions, right? Just to reduce the toxic burden that you may be exposed to.
Awesome. Yeah. That's good to know. I'm going to keep a lookout on the next tea purchase I make to see where my tea is sourced. So thanks for that. All right, let's talk a little bit about water and water filtration and whether we should be drinking tap water. Is it safe? I mean, just for reference, we are living, both of us, in the Greater Toronto area. So it might be different for someone who's living in a different area. But if you want to touch on topics around water, that would be awesome.
Yeah, so first of all, I find no one drinks enough water. Most people do not drink enough water, right? And if we look at, relative water safety, our tap water is relatively safe, right? So we're fortunate in that case. But if you look at the water at like a more microscopic level, there's actually a lot that is still in there even after it's gone through, the sewage and it's been treated and purified and all that. You're still going to find contaminants in it. So some of the common ones that you might find would be like lead or arsenic, cadmium, and then to disinfect it, they'll put in chlorine, right? And then fluoride. And also when people, because people are taking medications, that's going to be found in our water as well, right? So I would recommend using something like a reverse osmosis water filter for your drinking water and your cooking water, or distilled water. You can also get spring water in glass bottles. You know how you have the water coolers at work? You can get one of those, and there are companies that do it in glass so that you're avoiding the plastic. And if you're doing a distilled water or reverse osmosis water, I would recommend having some sort of remineralization for it. So that can either be in the system itself, or you can add it afterwards, like with electrolyte drops. And I find that with distilled and reverse osmosis water, it makes it taste better for me, and which helps me to drink more water. And also, another place that you may want to filter your water is in the shower, right? Because there's going to be chlorine that is coming through that water, and especially if you're taking hot showers, it's going to be converted into a gas, and you're going to be breathing that in. So some people, if they have very sensitive lungs, that may actually affect them. Or if they have sensitive skin, that's going to affect them as well. And also your skin does absorb a lot of things that it is exposed to. So that is another potential way to get things into your body that you may not necessarily want there. So a lot of these systems you can get at the like the hardware store. Like, what kind of a store is that? The hardware store, or there's some water specialty places in the GTA that will help you out with that too. And if you can get a system to filter water going into your house, you know, if you own the home and you're able to do that, to get a filter for the water going into your home, and then filters within like the bathroom or whatever, that will help with improving the filtration overall.
Yeah, that's good to know. And what about if we can't install, like you mentioned, like a reverse osmosis system or something that's super heavy duty, or we don't have access to like a whole home filtration system if we don't own the home? Are there other things that we can use that are maybe like something like on the counter that can filter? Or what about like fridge filtration systems? Are those good enough? Or do you have any advice in terms of like other options?
Yeah, like I'm still looking into like the fridge filtration systems, because a lot of people have those. In terms of other like stand-up countertop ones, you can get the like the water coolers. So a lot of places will rent those, and then you can get the distilled water, the spring water available that way. Or a lot of people find that the Berkey water filter works really well. So that for the people who are in the GTA, they can get that at Watermart. So watermart.ca sells those, and they're pretty good for being countertop water filtration units for drinking and cooking.
Amazing. That's good to know. What are your opinions on the Brita filtration systems? One of the most popular ones out there.
Yeah, I don't think they're that effective. They may be able to get out a little bit of fluoride and a little bit of chlorine, but everything else that you actually do want out of your water, all the other things that you also want out of your water are not necessarily going to be filtered. Like, it may improve the taste and smell because of the charcoal filters found in it, but other than that, it wouldn't filter out too much more.
Awesome. Good to know. All right. So I feel like we could talk about all of these things for ages, but for someone who's listening to this and they're like super overwhelmed with all of these different things that they're just learning about, might be putting toxins into their body, do you have any tips for someone that might be able to start slowly and start to incorporate these, or maybe what areas they should focus on more so?
Yeah. So one of the things that I really wanted to mention that was washing your new clothes before you wear them, right? I find a lot of people don't do that. And the reasons why you should do that is because there will be a lot of chemicals found on your clothing, like particularly formaldehyde and some other, for genes like azo dyes, that are disruptive to like your endocrine system. Formaldehyde can be really harmful, and I've actually had a patient who was out somewhere and they didn't have access to laundry, like a washing, like to wash their clothes. So they had bought a new dress and they had tried to steam it in the bathroom of the hotel. And then they had walked in, there was like steam everywhere, and they didn't wash their face off after being exposed to the steam, because you're like, okay, it's just water, right? And then she has very sensitive skin and she broke out really badly, like just on her face where all the steam had contacted. And we suspect it was because of trying to steam out the clothing. So yeah, so there are chemicals in the clothes because they want to preserve the color and the quality of the clothing as it is being shipped from usually overseas, right? So a lot of those chemicals that will help with that are also really bad for your skin. Well, they're really bad for you, and they will be absorbed through your skin when you wear clothes. So that's even like socks and like underwear and just shirts, and especially children's clothing, because children are going to be much more susceptible to the effects of these. So that's one thing you can start doing, washing all your new clothes before you wear them. And I find a lot of people are they're wearing a lot of fragrances. So a lot of their products have a lot of strong fragrances in them, right? Or they're using a lot of Glade plugins. So looking at alternatives to that, like maybe you can get little devices that you can plug into the wall and just add a few drops of essential oil in them, which will not be exposing you to all those fragrance and like which are just chemicals. Right? For some people who are overly sensitive, they will cause things like headaches or mood changes or sometimes seizures if you are someone who has severe multiple chemical sensitivities. So, and those are things that you don't really need in your home to have it smell fresh. It doesn't really, like, it just smells like nice smelling chemicals. And so I find a lot of people will do that. And so, yeah, like also doing a cosmetic or a skincare product audit to see, what sorts of chemicals are in your skincare products, right? There's a really good app. I think we talked about this. Let me pull it up really quickly. So what it does is it allows you, sorry?
The Think Dirty app?
Yes. Yeah. So you scan the barcode and it tells you what sorts of chemicals are in that product. So that can help you make more informed decisions. Right? So that would be one thing, well, two things that you can start with. And then when you look at the other thing that you could look at would be your diet, right? So the diet for me and for my patients is like the base of what we're going to do. I don't like to layer things on top, like layer supplements on top of a poor diet, because you're just wasting time and you're wasting supplements, right? So for me, well, personally and for my patients, 80% of what you're consuming on a daily basis should be in line with your health goals and in line with managing your current health challenges, right? So eating organic food, reducing food that is going to be inflammatory. So my diet is mainly gluten-free and dairy-free for the most part, at least 80% of my time. So what I usually do is when I'm home and I can control all that, then that's when I will be more mindful of my diet. If I'm going out with friends, then I will indulge a little bit, but I don't really go out that often. Also now, because of everything that's going on, no one is going out that often. So, I'm able to keep that diet intact for the most part. And reducing the amount of refined carbohydrates and refined foods in general. So the less processing, the better. And if you're going to, so a lot of people, because they're so busy, they'll do a lot of ready-made meals, which are microwavable and found in plastic. So that is not, it's actually exposing you to a lot of toxins. To have food, especially food with fat in it or acidic food like tomato sauce. So a lot of these things are pastas. And then having that in contact with plastic, which will then also like deteriorate the plastic and get more of that plastic into your food. And then on top of that, microwaving it, which will then get more like, so heating this up, which will then move more plastic and chemicals into your food further. So what I would suggest is to, slowly start considering batch cooking, right? So that you have ready-made meals that are healthy and then storing them in glass containers, right? Especially if they're foods that, are acidic or greasy. I think the only time I would consider storing in plastic would be if you had like dry foods, like, I don't know, crackers or something, right? Which I don't really eat, but people do, people eat that. So where like there wouldn't be much transfer over, like that would be the only time that I would be like, okay, maybe that's okay. But for the most part, I use glass. And then you can also use, I also use like the beeswax covers, or sorry, beeswax wraps, food wraps. Yeah, I really like those. They actually are really good at keeping like produce fresh, right? Even if you've cut it. Yeah, I was actually really amazed when I first started using those. I thought they were really effective for, for something that I've never tried before. Yeah, so reduce your exposures, give your body the tools that it needs to heal and maintain health. And I guess the other one would be making sure that you're getting enough sleep and you're going to bed early enough, right? Because the timing of your sleep is actually really important. Like, I know people say, get anywhere from 6 to 8 hours, but it actually, it also matters the time that you start with those 6 to 8 hours, right? In traditional Chinese medicine, they say every hour you go to bed before midnight counts as 2 hours, which is interesting. And from a health perspective, like it makes sense, right? From what I've seen, what we've been taught. Yeah, and sleep is really important because that's actually the time that your body takes to heal. That's the prime time that your body uses to heal and do things like consolidate your memories and wash out your brain, right, as well. Like, they found new research that it helps with brain health, right? Getting good quality sleep. Yeah, so I don't know if that was like too much or not enough.
I think you had some really awesome tips there. And I think that everyone will appreciate learning more about how they can support their health. So yeah, thanks for all that. And I'm really happy that you mentioned plastic, because that was something that's a pretty big topic. And I know it's to do with a lot of food safety, but it's also in a lot of things. Like, every product basically has plastic. And I guess it's probably a good way to reduce the amount of plastic that we're using, also for the environment, but because plastic leaches a lot of toxins. And then if it comes into contact with food, then you're ingesting those toxins. So I'm glad that you mentioned that.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I know we can talk for hours about this, and there are so many different places that you can expose yourself to toxins, and maybe a lot of different things that you can do to reduce your toxic burden. But I know you've created a guide for everyone here that's called the Non-Toxic Kitchen Guide, and it's going to help with reducing our toxic burden in other areas of the kitchen, maybe in like the types of things that we're using to cook our foods in, not only the food itself. So that's also really important, and it's a good place to start maybe thinking about switching out things that are, I guess, plastic to glass, or like the type of nonstick cookware that you might be using that might be leaching toxins into your food. So I know you've created that for us, so everyone can download that and learn a little bit more about your kitchen guide. And I guess if everyone is interested in learning a little bit more about what you do, where can we send them?
Yeah, so I do practice in Toronto. So if there is anyone in Ontario who would like to see me one-on-one, then I can be reached at the Environment Enviromed Clinic in Toronto. So there's that. I have a website, drmarileand.com. So when I'm current, I like to post blogs on there because I think there's a lot of information available, but that's not necessarily, it's not necessarily formatted in a way that is practical for most people, right? So trying to interpret it in a way that makes it practical for people, right? Because you're not going to do it if you don't know what to do, right? So I'll put blogs up on there. Instagram, non-toxic doc. So I'll post information on there. And I have a Facebook group called Living That Non-Toxic Life that you can join. And I like to put some information on there as well.
Awesome. We'll post all of the links to everything that you mentioned in the comments or in the description below, wherever you're watching this video. So I just want to thank you so much for being here and for sharing all this amazing knowledge. I hope everyone enjoyed, and I hope you learned a lot. Thank you so much for being here, Marillea.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Daina.
All right, we'll have to have you back again another time to talk about even more, because I'm sure we can talk about so many different things in regards to all of the things that you do.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, enjoy the rest of your day. I hope you have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks.